Okay, so today we are with Daniel Turner, the founder of Quirkos. I don't know if you remember, but some time ago in my channel and in my Facebook I actually started this topic a little bit, so I mentioned there is this software. So today I want to talk to Daniel about Quirkos, what makes it special or what makes it a really good software, and also about academia, leaving academia, and basically about career a little bit. So thanks again, Daniel, for your time today.
Thanks for interviewing me. It's going to be great fun, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is. I was really looking forward to.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Yeah. So firstly, can you just tell me a little bit about your background in general?
Yeah, sure. So I did a degree in human geography, and then I did a PhD as well in human geography, and that was health related, on global health topics. And that was very qualitative based, then after that PhD I did the usual thing, doing postdocs, a bunch of different universities in the UK, mostly doing qualitative but also some quantitative and mixed methods stuff as well, and it was really through that work that I kind of felt that there was something missing, like there was a kind of software that wasn't really there at the moment, and I didn't know anything about developing software. So I just kind of felt, well, yeah, someone else will create something that's easy and simple to use, right? It doesn't need to be very complex for most of the qualitative stuff we were working on. But it never happened. So I thought, well, okay, so I've got to try and do it. And it just took off, and now that's my full-time work. So
all right.
Yeah,
that's interesting. I told you last time that actually just before we met, just before I learned about Quirkos, I had the same kind of thought. I was thinking, maybe I should think about, I wouldn't be able to develop software myself, but, to use my insights into, from using the software. And I was thinking that would be great if, maybe to think about actually entering some collaboration and developing a software, because I did feel that I'm sure they had some experts, consultants when they create things like in Vivo or the other ones, but I still felt like there were so many things that were not common sense, like when I was analyzing data. So that's very interesting. And another question that I had, you mentioned human geography. So what is it? I just wondered.
It's a very good question. I think it's the best discipline because it draws from so many other things, and it doesn't really get too hung up on what counts as being human geography or not, which makes it quite difficult to define. It's basically stuff that happens about people in a place, and that's it. So it draws a lot from sociology, it draws from economics, it draws from all the humanities really. There's
psychology as well.
Psychology, aspects of architecture, a lot of health stuff as well. But anything that might have some component where it varies spatially, you would argue.
Okay, so is it like, let's say, a community, I don't know, minority communities living in a in a specific place?
Yeah,
in a specific
absolutely.
town? Okay.
Lots of migration work,
Okay.
lots of studies into migration, and people, their experience of living in different places. So it's very, very human focused, very person focused.
And it's focused on humans, and it's focused specifically on location. So whatever, like their experiences or relationship with that location.
Yeah, exactly. Or differences in different places. Why things are different for people in one place than another. So, urban, rural divides and things like that. It's very, very broad, but very interesting because whatever you're interested in, you can choose different methods and you can go with it. So lots of people use qualitative methods in human geography, but lots of people also use quantitative methods, and everything in between. And you can draw from psychology and anything.
It does sound like a very, very flexible and dynamic field where you can, and it's also focused on people. So which is my interest. Obviously I did work on migrants as well. So that's very interesting. Okay, so you mentioned that after the degree you did some postdoc work. So can you just tell me a little bit more about that period? Was it easy, or especially what I'm interested in and what I'm hoping to hear is how and why that transition happened, when or why, and how you decided that maybe you want to, for example, work on developing this software.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I really enjoyed doing the PhD because I could just focus on one thing that I was really interested for many years, and I really enjoyed doing the postdocs because each one, they were all related to health
Mm.
and health systems in the UK, but they were both very varied.
Mm.
So there was, each time I was kind of starting a new project and learning new things and working in a new area, and I really loved that. So I couldn't imagine myself kind of focusing all my career studying just one topic. And so I really enjoyed the postdocs, but you know, you get to that stage where you start putting in grant applications and funding applications, and it's a lottery. I mean, it's such a low acceptance rate.
Yeah.
You have to do so many applications, and I think there's still a problem for young and early career researchers that when you get to the stage where you want to start leading on your own research project, so I've been research assistant and research fellow, but when you start wanting to be PI on your own projects, one of the prerequisites is that you've already been a PI on a research project. So it's very difficult to get that first research grant where you can lead. So I had lots of ideas working with colleagues for different research proposals that we wanted to do, but it's so constricted to find the time to do the grant applications as well as writing the papers and actually doing the research.
It's very difficult, and also, I mean, you are lucky enough to have these research assistant jobs anyway, and that's I would add is another frustrating thing, because I remember when I started to apply for RA jobs after the graduation, it's exactly the same as you mentioned with that later stage when you want to be the lead investigator, because to get a research assistant job, usually what you need is an experience of being a research assistant.
Yes, it's a chicken and egg problem. Yeah.
I remember it was just so frustrating because the applications were good, and I would get invited to the interview, and they loved it, and every time I was so pumped up, and I knew I did very well, and I could tell there was good rapport, they were happy, but then they would always say something like, "You really did great," when they called me, but we just have this, another applicant, and he's more experienced. And I thought, okay, I'm not surprised. It can be frustrating. Okay, so you decided at that stage that you want to focus on something else and just do something that.
Yeah. Well, I always had what became Quirkos kind of going on in the back of my mind, and so I was tinkering around with it in my free time when I could, and then I just thought, okay, well, this is the opportunity to try it and focus on it and see how it goes, and so that's what happened. We spent about a year kind of behind closed doors developing it with our software developer, and with a small group of about 12 beta testers who were from different industries, so market research and academia, different disciplines. And they loved it, so it kind of just grew from there and just became so popular that it was using up all my time, so it just became a full-time thing,
So I was just wondering, so you decided you want to do it, but you did not have programming skills.
No.
So you obviously needed people. So how did you organize that? Like, were you just lucky enough to have a group of friends who knew how to program, or did you have to hire people and pay them?
I mean, I had some really good friends who gave some advice early on, who were very experienced working with databases and Python and things like that, and they gave me some fantastic advice, but they were so busy on their own projects that they didn't really have any time to do anything with me. That's fine. And then I thought, well, okay, I like learning new things. I'll try and learn how to develop software. And it was very hard, and it was very slow. And so I thought, okay, so I need to reach out to someone. So I started looking around for a freelance software developer who was fairly local, because it's all new to me. So I needed someone that I could interact with face to face. And I sent them a document about what I thought needed to happen to develop the software. And I had a meeting with him in a coffee shop at the train station, and he was like, "You've sent me this is the software specification. This is exactly what I need to know." And he said, "This is how much I think it would cost to develop." And I was like, "Okay, right, let's try it." And that was my first lesson. So that was Adrian, the original developer, and he did in about a week what had taken me about 2 months. So it was invaluable that he really had that experience and knew what he was doing.
Yeah, that's true. That's what I say, that you have to collaborate.
Yeah.
I mean, there are certainly I guess it didn't hurt that you learned a little bit of a new skill of programming.
And that's something that I use every day now.
Yeah.
So it's been super useful.
But then eventually it did help to reach out and find somebody to collaborate. So you can't always just be by yourself so even though that's another topic actually, that's an interesting topic because I wanted to talk about it especially for this video because I know that at the university they always emphasize this importance of collaborating with people, of networking, but I do agree to some extent, but then there are people who there are a couple of reasons. Either they are more productive and more effective working on their own, or there are also people who are just, they are introverts. They don't really like to reach out. So, and I always felt that perhaps, although, as I said, to some extent, at some level or at some point, usually, obviously you have to, go out and talk to people, but it's not like, if you don't feel like it, it's not like you absolutely have to do it, all the time, just for the sake of doing it. So I think it's very important because I imagine, I was a little bit stressed about it as well when I was at the university and people kept saying that, you have to, even when writing my dissertation, there was an option to do like a group dissertation. And most people, a lot of people went for it, and I just, this wasn't because I was an introvert, but this was because I absolutely don't like working on specific and personal things as a dissertation, working in a team, because I wouldn't feel that I have control over it. So, and I was worried because I was worried whether it's gonna, everybody's doing it in a group, and I'm not. So I remember I was worried, but just so it's like just a lesson to those who do prefer to work on their own. That sometimes you can still do. It's not like you absolutely have to team up at the university, especially. Of course, we're talking about different thing now because we're talking about actually developing software. Obviously, you need some collaboration for that.
And I think it's something that sometimes that people find really difficult doing a PhD because you can't really collaborate. I mean, it's very difficult to, you're supposed to show everything that you've done, like all the literature reviews and all the data collection and analysis. There's such a pressure to kind of do it all yourself, and it's not usually like that in academia. Usually you're working as a team and you have to learn how to collaborate.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very good point actually, because and later on when you do work even as a research assistant, usually you are expected to communicate with other research assistants or obviously with your primary investigators. So it is funny that we are, we're molded into that mode of you have to rely on yourself, and then actually it's nothing like that. But maybe it's a good thing. Maybe because that way we do learn so much. And
I think you need to learn the whole process. But again, a PhD is not very much like being in academia, doing research in academia.
Yeah, that's true. But like I said, maybe that's for the good, because if you relied on somebody, like I said, I know these people. Some people just love being in a group. So especially at master's level, there are so many assignments and presentations where you present as a group, and I mean I don't blame them, but that's the thing, that they made it at the master's level, but for them, perhaps at the PhD level, it may be a little bit difficult because all of a sudden, I mean, you can't really rely on people, because at the end of the day, you're the one that needs to
take responsibility.
So that's very interesting. I guess it's just about being flexible and finding a balance between. Because I'm not saying you shouldn't talk to people when you're doing PhD, but I was very happy to do it on my own, to be honest. Like I said. I normally do like to communicate and talk to people, but not when I'm doing something that is mine, so to speak. So with the PhD, I was just happy to stay behind closed doors for 3 years and just finish it. So I guess it depends really. Okay, so let's talk about Quirkos now, because that's interesting. That's very interesting. Firstly, what is it again? We kind of mentioned obviously data analysis, but any summary to start with?
I mean, what we wanted to do is create a very accessible piece of software. So something that every level was going to be easy for people to get going with. So it had to be very visual, very intuitive, very quick to learn. and also very affordable. Because I felt that there were a lot of people who were not using qualitative software, so they were doing it on paper, or they're using Word or Excel, that were then struggling later on in the analysis, trying to pull everything together because those systems aren't kind of specifically designed for qualitative analysis. I mean, it can work very well for particular projects, but I think a lot of people I saw getting stuck kind of later on in the process. And the other packages out there are very powerful, but very complicated with that.
Yeah, and very expensive.
And very expensive.
Usually.
Yeah, so I felt that there was a real need for people doing very pure qualitative analysis, and not huge, kind of mixed methods or data mining kind of projects, but the small kind of semi-structured interviews, focus groups, and just wanting to work with a small amount of qualitative data, learn the software very quickly so they could focus on the data and doing the analysis themselves, and not worry about the learning what all the buttons do, basically.
Yeah, that's a good point, because just like you said, so many people decide not to use software, but not because they have some specific reason apart from that. Usually they're just worried and anxious about having to learn it. That's one thing. And obviously the price, which is something we'll get to in a moment as well. But it is true that if you're a student, if you're a master's student, and you collected, let's say you've conducted 10 interviews, and all you need to do is to professionally organize them and analyze them. So you don't really need all the options from NVivo, and you don't want to be spending time learning about all the separate options because you won't be using them. You just want a software that will help you quickly learn, obviously, and quickly do it, and then.
And I think that's why a lot of people start with Word or Excel, because it's something they're already familiar with. So I think I'm odd, and because I'm interested in the tool, the software. Most people aren't interested in the tool, they're interested in what you build with it, what you make with it. And it gets to a stage where you've got that data and you're just excited to look at it and do something with it. And you don't want to spend like a week learning the software, you want to just kind of like jump in and go.
That's true.
And for small projects, that's kind of the idea for Quirkos, for kind of smaller things. But don't get me wrong, I mean, if you're doing large projects, you need some of the complex kind of multimodal tools or something like that in NVivo, or networking mapping diagrams and stuff like that in Atlas TI or MaxQDA. Then those are fantastic tools. But most people just are going to do pretty basic analysis of text, basic code and retrieve.
Absolutely true, because to be honest, most data analysis work that I do, I hardly ever use any of these options that you mentioned. I obviously use coding because that's what people want me to do, so they want thematic analysis. For thematic analysis you need coding, you need folders sometimes, or basic things to organize your data. And then sometimes you do need attributes and values if you want, which is, I will explain to those that don't know, if you want, for example, to compare how did women, or how did men do, or what did men say compared to women, so how did that one theme compare between males and females. So that's so you assign attributes and values which are male, female, so the characteristics, and I know that Quirkos obviously it has it as well. So just we need to make that clear as well, although we're talking about how simple, how easy Quirkos is, it doesn't mean that it stops there. It stops at simply coding the data. And actually, assigning attributes and values, when I worked on Quirkos and I gave it a try, and I really loved that option as compared to NVivo, which felt much more common sense when you almost automatically can choose these. I don't know if they were. I can't remember if they were called attributes.
Properties.
Oh, properties.
Properties of values, but it works in the same way.
And it was very easy. I don't even remember. I'll put it on the screen anyway when I edit the video to show how it's done. But I just remember it was super easy. I think you could in one box add a new one and then assign it straight away or something.
That's right. And just drop down to use ones again, so you don't have to.
Which is good. And in NVivo again, you have to. I mean, if you work a lot with NVivo like I do, obviously I'll do it quickly, but you do have to switch between a couple of menus and assign a new attribute and then create a value and assign the value and turn your files into cases and a couple of other things. So here it's better. And what else? So about coding, obviously, and I mean about visualizing the coding. Because
Yeah.
that's, I would say is like the first thing that is very very noticeable.
Yeah, it's pretty striking when you use it for the first time. I mean, again, pretty much all the other software packages look quite similar. I mean, it's kind of like a spreadsheet kind of interface, lots of menus, lots of columns and things, very grey. And so we put the codes as bubbles in the software, and that means that you can interact with them, you can drag and drop, move them around, drop them on top of each other. The bubbles are your codes, and they store all the data in them. You just drag and drop text onto the bubbles. But for me, one of the things which came out using the other software packages is you get to a stage where you're kind of being abstracted from the data. You don't really feel as engaged with it. So what we did is we made the bubbles grow as you add to things. So you're kind of constantly getting this feedback loop of what's coming out of your data, and you can see just from the sizes what themes are growing, what you're coding more than other things.
So as you code, so let's say you have this theme called happiness or job satisfaction. As you code more and more with that theme, you can see on the screen that it's growing, as opposed to a low theme that was only discussed once.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is great. So that's another thing that I love, that you don't have to switch, between the actual workspace and the visualization menus or whatever tools. But here,
that's right.
It's just done for you pretty much, and it happens, and you're constantly reminded of relationships as well, because that's how it works. You can join them and organize them on the screen.
Yeah.
So that's
because I think qualitative analysis is a flow, it's a process. And if it becomes very stop-start because you have to jump through different menus and run through wizards to generate a visualization or an output or something like that, it kind of makes you feel that it's kind of solidified at a particular point. But I don't think it does. It's a flow, it's a cycle, and
that's true.
We try and reflect that in the software, that everything is live and just kind of evolving as your analysis evolves.
I think, that's a very good point, and I think that's, obviously I do think it's one of the main strengths of Quirkos, and when I think about it now that we're talking about, this how it reflects generally qualitative data analysis, is true, because what I do in NVivo usually is I work on all these codes and themes, but then on a separate piece of paper, I'm a very visual person, visual kind of memory, and on a separate piece of paper I usually do pretty much what Quirkos does automatically.
Right.
So I have these themes, so these bubbles or squares or whatever, and I try to organize them. Sometimes I like to draw connections and think whether it makes sense. So that's constantly what I do. So I code here. I do know that NVivo has some options, but to be honest, the visualizing the model option in NVivo is not very good, and it definitely, as you just said, it poses a risk of completely becoming detached from the data, because you really have to focus on how to create these shapes and how to connect them. It's not really user friendly, in my opinion. So that's why I'm using this separate piece of paper constantly, and here it just happens all at once. So you're coding and it's happening for you, so you can see these. Oh yeah, this is great. And I wondered, because that's probably the main thing that bothers me or worries me when I think about switching to Quirkos, for example. How does it relate? At the moment, obviously, NVivo and Max QDA are probably the most popular.
And that was TI, the other one.
And that one as well. So people, for example, not only in job requirements where they ask for NVivo skill, but even if they don't, if you work on Quirkos and then let's say you want to collaborate with somebody who's not using Quirkos, or you want to send that data to them. So I'm just wondering how that, whether it's compatible.
Yeah, well, that's possible now. So there's a new standard exchange format called the REFI QDA exchange format, and that's supported by Quirkos and NVivo and Atlas TI and F4 Analyses, Deduce, and a whole bunch of other ones, Transana. So it's much easier to move projects from one to the other now. And that wasn't the case even a year ago. So it's a really new standard, and the support from all the different software developers has been fantastic.
So you can save it, or you can export it to that, and you can open it in NVivo, for example?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, which is great. I think this is a major thing, and
Yeah,
a major
it's huge.
improvement, because if it wasn't possible, then, like I said, you know, some people would be concerned maybe that, you know, nobody's going to be able to open my data, basically,
Yeah.
because they may not have the same software. So,
But I mean, it happened a lot. I mean, I saw people who moved from a department where they used MaxQDA to a department where they used NVivo, and then they couldn't work on their old data anymore because the university didn't have the license for it. And it's crazy. I mean, no other software works like that. I mean, it's not the case if you're using Google Docs, it won't talk to Word.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's a crazy situation, and I really hope something that, you know, you and I have grown up with, and that people will never have to suffer the frustration of that again. Because the other thing is that it means that you can use the software for what it's best at. So you could start some work in Quirkos, and then say, okay, I need to do some more advanced feature that's not in Quirkos but it's NVivo. That's okay, you can move your project onto NVivo now.
Yeah, that's
or
great.
back the other way. So if you want to do some visualizations in Quirkos.
It's a very good thing, definitely. Again, it doesn't, you know, such a little silly, you know, limitation could literally destroy projects, I can imagine.
Oh yeah.
In the past, and it's happened to me as well, like when I collaborated with people, and sometimes they have, I guess they are not even, I wasn't aware of that now it's actually possible, but because not so long ago even I had a situation when the person was using MaxQDA and I was using NVivo, and basically we couldn't, you know, find common ground and how to take this forward. So it's extremely important that there is this, you know, common common theme. Okay, so and now I said we'll get to the price, because that's actually another really good thing. So how does it, you know, look price-wise in general, if you want to work with Quirkos? And
so basically, again, it doesn't have as many features, so we don't charge as much, but it's roughly about half the price of the other qualitative software packages. So we now have two models basically. So you can buy a one-off license, which the student license is £55, and that's just yours forever. And then so you can move that. It's for one computer, but you can move it if you ever lose your laptop or spill coffee on it or something like that. We also have a subscription model now, so we've got Quirkos Cloud as well. And that means that you can install Quirkos on any number of computers. Project data is stored in our secure servers, and then wherever you log in, you've got your project data ready to keep working with. And that's £6 a month for students.
So that's, I mean, did you hear that? That's very good, because just to remind some people who may not know, NVivo is 1 year. Firstly, it's a 1 year license, and it's somewhere around. If you're not affiliated with a university, you know, fortunately, a lot of universities support that. And if you're lucky enough to be at a university that does, then it's not a problem. But if you're not affiliated with a university, so even if, or you graduate and you want to continue as a researcher, independent researcher, for example, that's, I think it's about £700 a year. So basically, that's
if you're not affiliated with the university, it's very expensive.
And there are different ones as well. I mean, packages 300 or 4 for something, I can't remember, but it's definitely not £50 for your whole life, basically. And also the second option sounds good, because you can, I imagine, again, it's for collaborative projects.
Exactly.
So you can just have this license, and so many people can use it in your department. So
that's right.
So again, did you say it was for what number of devices?
So the static license is just for one.
And the other.
And the subscription is you can install it on any number of.
Any number. So that's great, actually. Okay, so one more thing I wanted to ask is about a trial. So there is an option for a trial to basically see what it's like first.
That's right. You can just go to www.quirkos.com and you can download the full version of the software, so no restrictions on it. You can try the cloud version for 14 days, you can try the offline version for 4 weeks, and see how it works for you. And all our support materials, we've got video tutorials and things are available on the website. You don't have to register or anything for those. So.
Okay, I forgot to say, I will put the link in the description anyway, but I forgot to ask about the website, because you do, so that's another important thing, you do basically provide guidelines for by videos and
Yeah.
so that makes it even easier, and the trial is great again. I mean, it really does sound like a very very good thing for students. I can imagine now because it's simple, it's cheap, you get this trial. So yeah, perfect. Okay, so is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I don't think so.
All right.
Yeah, it's been really interesting talking to you today.
Yeah, it was great, and like I said, I was hoping we would cover Quirkos, we would cover a little bit about academia and your story. So again, I think I've spoken about it in my videos before. I've talked a lot about leaving academia. It's not that I'm such an opponent and enemy of academia, but it's just I feel that it needs to be talked about more. Because that's another long topic that like I said, I partially covered in my videos, but I feel that people they at least should be aware that there are a couple of things really. That one, that you do not have to stay in academia when you graduate, so you can have plenty of other good jobs. I'm not just talking about setting up your own business, which is great as well, but I mean, there are plenty of industry jobs, and and that's one thing. And the second thing they should be aware, maybe that's the most important one, that even if they want to stay in academia, it's not that easy, as easy as they imagine. So
it's very competitive right now. It's very competitive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the numbers again. I can't remember the exact figure, but I talked about it in one of the videos for social sciences, because obviously it's different for different fields. I think it's about, I don't want to lie about the number. I think it 1 in 4 or 1 in 6 or something. So it's roughly, I think it was about 20 something actually percent that do find a full-time job in academia. So which is which is not good. So obviously, I think if you're like a physicist, I think it's easier actually, because I don't know. It's just a guess, but I think if you are very specific, like astrophysicist or nowadays doing something about AI or robotics or whatever, I think it's probably easier. But social sciences, it's just like what you described, and your study, for example, take your study or take my study, which I was very passionate about. So it was about migrants and migrant identity. So sounds great, but later on nobody wants to know about it. So basically that's the problem. And I heard that somebody say recently that when you do your PhD, you think that this is the work of your life, and everybody's obviously going to be interested, and it's going to change the world as we know it. So, but it's not like it's just a training.
It's a training, and it's rare for it to be that big based around PhD, because it's teaching you how to be in academia. Yeah,
exactly. But we don't feel this way like when we study, and I think this is a little bit of the university's fault, because I don't want to dive into conspiracy theories too deep, and whether they would like the students or would not like the students to know how difficult it is to find a job. Whether this would affect the numbers of PhD students. But even maybe not that, but in general, wouldn't you say that it's probably not that hard to talk more about? I really don't remember like too much dialogue about what happens after. I just remember my assumptions, and like, okay, I'm probably gonna stay here.
It's one of those things. I think that universities are very good at an undergraduate level of presenting different employability options and suggesting different jobs that you can do with a degree, but they don't have that service at the postgrad level. And it is, as you say, it's the realistic alternative that a minority of people would stay and have their careers in academia. But there are opportunities outside academia. There are companies which employ people just to do research, in the government and public sector and market research and things like that. So there are fields outside of academia where you can use those skills, but there isn't that kind of career service post-PhD, postdocs.
That's how
so when people do kind of drop out of academia at that stage, there's very little support kind of.
That's how I felt. I mean, and there are hundreds of jobs. I only started to learn about it when, as I said, I was searching for jobs basically, and they are, and that's another thing that's very important, and that I talked about. I think we should try to foster that, or get rid of the sense that if you don't stay in academia, you know, you've wasted your time.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or you're a failure or something.
Yeah.
Because I think that's, I've spoken to many people who left academia, and most of them agree that they have this struggle, and I did have this struggle at one point, you know, when I was thinking, okay, I may leave academia, but then, you know, have I just wasted time, you know, have I just wasted 4 years doing that PhD? It's like, it felt like a failure, or like, you know, a plan B. So, you know, if I decide to leave academia, it's like as if I didn't succeed here, and I'm just gonna give it a try. So, but many people have this, you know, sense of, you know, this struggle, internal struggle, which again is not true. Like, and I think this is on the universities, you know, to tell you that you know, there's so many things you can do with your skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
Again, thanks for your time.
Yeah.
And
Thanks for speaking to me. It's been great fun.
yeah, it has, and I'll put the link, as I said, in the description. So if you want to find out about Quirkos, feel free to check the link and then check the website.